Welcome to Fast Politics, Meredith.
Molly, thank you again for having me.
So, a giant story this morning. Chris Whipple, who has interviewed many a chief of staff, does 11 interviews with Suzy Wiles. She says a lot of stuff. I'm going to couch this. I have always thought that Suzy Wiles was uniquely talented at doing what she does. Again, this is in no way a positive attribute because the administration she's working for is doing a lot of pretty scary stuff. But I thought we saw a real moment in the campaigns when she left DeSantis to go work for Trump. And it was like the moment that Trump started to really catch fire in the primary. And I just think I do think of her as being very talented, but let's talk about this interview.
Well, I can't really speak to her talent, but I
Right.
can speak to the substance of what she said and why I think this matters. Over the course of these interviews, she said some incredibly incriminating things
Mhm.
about the president of the United States, about all of the high level people within this administration.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I want us to consider is if she is talented, as you say, or she has experience dealing in politics, when you say these things, I think that you have some understanding of the ramifications of what you're saying. And
Mm.
for me, for her to just say on the record that in the first 3 months of this administration, the president of the United States was completely animated, woke up pretty much every morning thinking about political retribution, the kinds of things she's articulating on the record are things that should be incompatible with public service. They're things that were
Mhm.
traditionally not considered legal in this country for our political leaders. And I want us to think about the kind of brazen attitude these people need to possess to outline these things to a reporter, knowing that they will be shared for publication. To me, what that says is they look back at the first Trump administration, they look back at January 6th and saw that there was no political accountability. She tries to add
Mm.
this caveat that she tried to encourage President Donald Trump not to release all of the rank and file Trump supporters who had gone to prison after attacking the Capitol on January 6th. But what this doesn't say, but shows us, is that you can articulate all of these things that aren't within the bounds of acceptability, which aren't legal, and you feel like there are no consequences for you or the people you're working with or around for having done those actions. And so part of this was incredibly stunning to read. Her sort of assertions about Elon Musk, who was like shadow running the government at some
Right.
point,
Being
being
on
like
drugs.
posting and being on drugs or
Right.
comparing Donald Trump to an alcoholic, which I think does alcoholics a disservice to say that,
Right.
he's not in control of his impulses and that she's comfortable being around him because she had some experience being around people with alcoholism. Like so many of these things are deeply disturbing.
Right.
She's saying them out loud. They rose to the level, I saw someone post this on Blue Sky, that if the New York Times is writing up almost verbatim an aggregation
Mhm.
of things that were reported in another outlet, we should really think about how serious those things are. And to do this, to say these things, I think that you think that there's going to be no consequences for that. But if you leave office and after you leave office, both of those things are big questions that you just get to keep living your life. And I think that that is actually at the heart of the problems and the rot that we are seeing in our politics and in our government right now.
It's interesting you say that. That was not my take from this. My take was that she is the most powerful person in the admin, and that was what she was trying to show now. And that maybe she had gotten a little too comfortable because I'm not convinced. I mean, there's so many things that are going to be problematic for this administration going forward. I'm thinking about the deportation. I'm thinking about the many times in which we've seen already, courts telling the administration to do one thing and the administration doing something else, right? Like there have been so many instances where just what we're seeing, with not a ton of leaks has been sort of shocking that I don't think of her as like the most, and I'm not a defender in any which way, but I just thought I found it interesting that and I wondered, did she get slipped up from the 11 interviews? Did she just get too comfortable, or was she doing this on purpose? Right? Because she's cutting the knees off of s- Elon, clearly, JD Vance, and Marco, right? Marco's a real believer. JD is a political animal, and Elon is on drugs, right? She says that. She says she's kidding, or she has some caveat, but I just wondered, was this intentional or was this accidental?
I can't speak to her motivations, right? I
Right,
think when you make a decision to speak with a reporter in the protracted and intentional sense that she did, you have an understanding that you're trying to create an image to the world about who you are and how you act. And maybe that image that she had over what she was doing and how she was showing up diverged from the reality of how we might receive it. So I think that there were certain points, for example, in this interview where she tried to say that she had disagreements with the president, which she probably believed were in her strategic interest
right,
to express because what he's doing is so unpopular. But
right,
ultimately, she also is telegraphing and indicating that she's going along with everything that he's
right,
doing. She's
right,
never at one point overruled him. She says that if it's ever a disagreement between the two of them and there's a tie, quote unquote, it always goes to the president. Even in a follow-up for the New York Times write-up of the Vanity Fair interview, she was asked about some of her comments. And when the New York Times asked for follow-up, she said, "Well, I never said that." And then they went to the Vanity Fair and played a recording of her saying those things. So I think
right,
when the White House breeds a culture of disloyalty, when the culture of in that White House is based on lies, and when it's also based on the whims of one person and the
right.
entire universe running the government collapses to 6 or 7 people. I mean, that was the thing that was so interesting to me about the editor's note describing Vanity Fair's decision-making process behind running this piece. And we can unpack some of that decision-making process in a little bit later. But you know, they talked about how when you were in the room with these 6 people, including Suzy Wiles, JD Vance, Marco Rubio, Stephen Miller, Russell Vogt, you got the sense that the entirety of the federal government was being run by this half dozen group of people or so.
And it is.
And and it is, and that's really scary to think about because
Yeah.
I think that some of those people had a serious agenda, probably more serious than the
She
president of the
said
United States.
Russ Vaught was a zealot.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, go on.
And, I think Donald Trump cares about building his ballroom and being
Mhm.
beloved and getting to post whatever he wants on the internet. And you see this room of people in the White House being photographed in a certain way. I mean, I feel uncomfortable with them being like part of a glamour photo shoot at the White House because we have to think also about, the image that projects, right? Like, those sorts of photos, those posed portraits, these are people who are hateful,
S
they're ruining
so
the government, they're
so
ruining the
yeah,
country,
yeah,
and,
yeah. So, but let's stop for a second because
yeah.
there are 2 things happening here. One is that piece did not help them, right? That piece was not a puff piece. That piece, I mean, I agree, the photos, I mean, I don't first of all, I don't know what if you're Stephen Miller, why are you posing for photos? Obviously, this does nothing for you. I mean, I guess he thinks he's become, he's getting glossy magazine treatment, but, like, it's just whatever. But I want you to talk, but that piece was actually, the Chris Whipple piece, there is no world in which those people are happy with that piece.
I don't think that the piece is a puff piece, and I think how we present these people and the
Right.
kind of treatment that they get and how we make sense of what it is that they are saying, how we provide context for
Right.
what they're saying is really an important and significant step. And I don't really know that we've seen a lot of that contextualization or that we've seen the roles that these people are playing, really articulated, unpacked, communicated in a way that helps us understand the actual state of this country. And for the people who were the subjects of it, like, I think that they're happy with it because this is who they want to be and this is how they want to be known. Like, I think a lot about Stephen Miller, who is 2 years ahead of me in college. And I think he loves every piece of coverage that quote unquote attacks him because in his mind, like that's winning. So for him
Right.
to post for these photos in Vanity Fair and to feel like he's getting this treatment, it doesn't really matter how he is described because any sort of negative description you would put of him in that format is like something that I think builds him up in some way.
But he's not getting negative. I mean, he's getting like glossy magazine treatment. Like the photos are, you know, desert rose, right? They're like, they put the fun in fascism. It's the article, but the photos
Yeah.
are. I mean, you have these
Yeah.
people, you have Stephen Miller, the architect of the child separation, like in a Brioni suit, being like, it's a, like that for sure. That is not, you take those photos, you go down that road. But the Whipple piece is actually 11 really, pretty. I mean, that's what we do here is try to get people to say incriminating things. I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing an interview like that, and he gets her to say them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the biggest question now is again what I was saying at the beginning of this, which is that she felt free to say those incriminating things in some way. And
Right.
whether or not she went too far or got too comfortable, like again, I can't speak to that. But I do think that there is a sense of security that you can say these incriminating things and nothing will happen. And to me, that is the biggest indictment of the overall system, whether it is the checks and balances that once existed within the government or overall the attention span of the fourth estate and journalism more broadly. But for reporters to read what she articulated, it's one thing to to aggregate the top hits and quotes and things that seem most incriminating in this day one New York Times piece. It is another thing to actually focus on those things in a sustained way and ascribe some sort of value to them. Like this isn't a neutral position that she's outlining. Like this is a
Right.
position that has taken down presidents previously. And what I worry about is like all of these quotes, all of these things that she was saying getting washed out into the ocean because I think she believes that that's what will happen with what not only what she said about what they've done, but what they've done generally.
Clearly, there's going to be, some kind of reconciliation after this is over, where we take stock of the many ways in which this administration has broken the law and flouted our norms and any number of things. And so I think there are like so many questions when we look at this. Like, are they elevating people who are aspiring autocrats and treating them like they're normal? It's politics as usual. Also, is this the beginning of the unraveling of this administration? Because, one of the things Trump has done really successfully this time is he has, the first administration, he fired a lot of people because why not? And then this and that created a number of problems for him. And this time he's kept a lot of really sinister characters because he knows that if he fires them, it will be messier.
I wanna go back to the first question you posed, which is this idea of, like, are we sort of platforming or normalizing wannabe autocrats or, like, staffers to an autocrat versus is this a sign of the beginning of the end of the administration? That's an interesting question, right? Because, 1, I actually don't think that that's a dichotomy. I
Right.
do think by writing the editor's note and contextualizing this as we've gone to every White House and we've always taken these
Right.
photos and, posing these people in the way that they did, I do think it creates this patina of normalcy that,
Right.
like, this is just what a White House is, and these people, they're evil, but they're just coworkers. I feel like that was
Right.
one of the lines maybe in the editor's note that, like, "Oh, we were just in a room of coworkers," and, that's a little alarming.
Yeah.
But, um, for the beginning of the end question, I I think that the policies of this administration are deeply unpopular. And also, I think the depth of the destruction of this time has not even been fully reckoned with
No,
or
agreed.
understood. And our challenges the degree to which the government was torched, like, uh, I think that there's this general sense in Washington that every administration is a pendulum swing. That, but within the bounds of reason, you go from a Democrat to a Republican, and the government was so big that it would not be movable and we would have changes within the margins. And that's
Right.
not what we've seen. We have learned that every single good faith check and balance has not really held. And the amount of destruction we've done to higher education, to public health, to scientific research, to international aid, there's no switch flipping that's going to get us back to where we were before. And so that was sort of what I was indicating when I was talking about this first comment of the freedom to say these things and not to feel like there will be consequences. Because I think about those first few weeks of the Biden administration, which
Mm-hmm.
I actually think are some of the most revealing weeks in the history of our country, where there was this focus on kumbaya and unity and
Right.
moving
Huge
forward.
mistake.
And
Huge
and
mistake.
and accountability was absent
Right.
from that process. There was no political accountability for the Republican members of Congress who voted to reject a free and fair election, and there were almost 200 of them, right? And so this culture where we don't have accountability for actions has not actually allowed us to have a politics or a government that works. And so this might be the beginning of the end of this administration, but how we sort through what has happened and how we rebuild is what we will understand and know and live of the impacts of this administration. And
Right.
when you just get to this place where, these people can speak freely about this project, where they can pose for these photos, where they
Right.
can actually project this image, I feel like they think that they're living in a world divorced of accountability and divorced from the reality of
Right.
what they've created.
Yes, agreed. And that was a failure on the part of Democrats
Oh, for
to,
sure.
yeah, like what needed to happen there was real accountability and not, but Project 2025, they told us what they were going to do.
Yeah, and they're doing also, I will also say, like, the last thing is, like, not just a failure of Democrats, but a failure of the mainstream political media who wanted
Right.
to continue to give voice and platform members of Congress who voted to reject a free and fair election. That, like,
For
some of
sure.
the boundaries that were drawn, even corporate boundaries, at the beginning of that time, they eviscerated because they were no longer convenient or necessary. And living in a country where that is possible is what brought us here, and also I think what gives me sort of the biggest fears and reservations about our future.
So you're in the city of Chicago.
Mhm.
Let's talk about what's happening. It was cold in Chicago, so ICE went away because they are laser focused on whatever it is they do, mostly harassing people. They came back. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so just today, Custom and Border Patrol head Greg Bavino came back to Chicago. He's going around, it looks like the southwest side of the city and different just border suburbs around the city. One of the things that these federal forces and agents really rely on is when the most acute, egregious, and violent actions fall away from our attention, they keep executing some of these operations in a way that's persistent. I mean, I think we saw this in the Los Angeles area where, months ago, they were getting a lot of attention for being out in certain areas of the city. A lot of those operations persisted, but they weren't as concentrated or they didn't feel as egregious as before. And so one of the things that we're seeing here in the Chicago area is that this vigilance that we have or need to have, it needs to continue because these people are going to find random times to continue to show up and to terrorize our city because part of the design, the main feature of the design is randomized terror.
Right.
And so for him to land here and to show up and to see from some of our independent journalists here in Chicago, like Unraveled Press, that they're roving around the city and trying to create content and try to take people off the streets. Their mission is pretty clear and they're pretty consistent on it. And our ability to resist and to be out there in force is reliant on us actually knowing where they are and when they're there. And so all of these networks that have been created in Chicago, these like group texts, these organizations like ICER, which is one of the immigrant organizations here that sends out alerts where based on where ICE or CPB is confirmed found in the city. All of these things were lying and waiting based on what they had said about coming back in March. But it's clear that every once in a while, they're going to want to come here to remind people that, they're able to disrupt the way that we're living. And one of the things that I would really love to see from our state leaders is that, businesses here haven't fully rebounded. There are restaurants or grocery stores that haven't gotten all of their employees back because people are still living in fear. And so when those fears are still real, in the people who are experiencing them, I think we need to continue to acknowledge and uplift the reality of the situation. And, it reminds me of like when we were at the height of this, it did really remind me of being at the height of COVID, where there were
Right.
people who were afraid to leave their homes. And there was a whole constellation of small businesses and communities that were impacted, people not being able to show up to work, both emotionally, right? But also like financially, logistically. And I think some of the damage that's been done to cities where they've been more aggressive also has sort of gone underreported because we haven't looked at the totality of the impacts, the people who are too afraid to come to work, the businesses who don't have full employees. Like all of these things are still really real, and we can't let those get lost in the headlines either.
Such a good point. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you for having me.